What's up, Sooner fans? This is the SI Sooners podcast. Thanks so much for joining us via whatever platform you may be joining us, whether that's audio or visual. Today, I am Parker Thune. I am joined, of course, by John Hoover, who was in Lubbock this past weekend for the Sooners' mighty impressive 62-28 victory over Texas Tech. John, how's it going? Glad to see you're back home in Broken Arrow.
Yeah, I figured we'd change things up a little bit, Parker. Since I had about a 7.5-hour drive back home, had to stop in Wichita Falls and air up a tire. I had to stop and find a tire gauge, and then I had to find a place to air up my tire, and got a sandwich, and it wasn't cooked right. Man, don't stop in Wichita Falls if you can at all avoid it. But it was quite a trip. Drove down yesterday morning before the game. Sooners just put the hurt. I mean, I say that. They got off to a little bit of a slow start, and then they put the hurt on Texas Tech. It was a thorough, almost wire-to-wire butt kicking. And then got up this morning, got that extra hour of sleep that we so valuably needed last night after working late. But, yeah, back at it this morning. Energy's good. Just had a cup of tea. So, Parker, it's all yours, buddy.
Sounds great. Well, being the man that was there for the action last night, going to grill you on several fronts. Obviously, all of us witnessed, as you mentioned, a complete domination on both sides of the football by the Sooners. Their offense was phenomenal, as is the standard under Lincoln Riley. The defense, though, 3 takeaways in that contest. I tell you what, you mentioned Wichita Falls. I've got a lot of friends from the North Texas area, and as they relate it to me, there are a lot of euphemisms for the town of Wichita Falls, and none of them are appropriate for broadcast in any format. So, with that said, let's discuss this game in a little bit more detail, John. And of course, I want to start with Spencer Rattler, 21 of 30, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns in basically a half and change. We saw Lincoln Riley roll out Tanner Mordecai pretty early on in the third quarter, which made sense because Oklahoma had an enormous lead at that point. It just didn't make much sense to keep Rattler out there with where the game was at that particular point in time. But for the most part, a really efficient night for the young quarterback. John, what did you see? What were you encouraged by in how he threw the ball?
Yeah, I thought it was, Parker, really extremely efficient. 21 of 30, but 3 of those were drops. 2 of those were touchdowns. One of those was a 73-yard touchdown by who knew Marvin Mims could even drop a pass after the start that he's had to the season. So that would have added 73 yards plus the length of the other touchdown, which I can't remember off the top of my head. 3 more completions. 2 of those incompletions were spikes to stop the clock. Now, we're up to, 21 plus 5? We're up to 26 out of 30. Just an unbelievable night. More than that, though, Parker, and I asked Lincoln Riley this after the game on the post-game Zoom call, did he look more comfortable, more in command, more in control of the offense than he has at any point this season? And I think Lincoln Riley said, yeah, each game kind of stands on its own, but I think he agreed as well that that there was something to what I was asking, that Spencer Rattler, he just, he's when I asked Spencer the question, and of course this was the same theme, but when I asked Spencer the question, he said, it's slowing down for me more and more. It's getting slower and slower for me is the way he phrased it. And that's got to be encouraging when you consider the first couple of losses. He had costly turnovers. He had late turnovers with the game on the line. You turn this thing around now, 3 games later, Parker, this team, it's unbelievable how much they're growing up from starting with the quarterback, Spencer Rattler. He just had a real in-control game. I thought he looked poised. Texas Tech didn't really get after him much, but when they did, he calmly got out of the pocket. He escaped the pocket. The first few games when Kansas State and Iowa State got after him, he was running for his life. He was running and getting the heck out of there. This time he was running, keeping his eyes downfield, putting the ball on the money, throwing the ball to guys wide open, being patient, waiting for them to break open. So very encouraging stuff, I think, on the whole from Spencer Rattler.
And I tell you what, John, that touchdown pass to Austin Stogner that he tossed late in the second quarter, what a ball that was. And you think about it, another thing to note here, ever since Lincoln Riley briefly benched Rattler for Tanner Mordecai in the Texas game, Rattler hasn't turned the ball over. He's been much more conservative and much smarter with the football, and that hasn't come at the expense of the shots downfield that we're used to seeing him take. He's still throwing the ball downfield with a good degree of regularity, but he's not putting the ball in harm's way, and that's got to be really encouraging to see for Lincoln Riley and the rest of the Sooners offense, that their quarterback is making wise decisions with the ball in his hands. Now, another guy that really emerged last night as a weapon in the passing game, of course, we already knew he was a weapon, but by far had his most productive day as a Sooner. That would be Theo Weiss, the former 5-star recruit, the sophomore, who we saw in limited action last season. He made a couple big plays in that dramatic comeback win over Baylor. But headed into this 2020 season, I think the expectation was that he was going to see much more of a role in this offense. However, through the first 5 weeks, there's really two guys, Marvin Mims and Austin Stogner, that jumped out at you as the go-to guys in the offense for Spencer Rattler. However, last night, Weiss, for the first time as an Oklahoma Sooner, breaks the century mark and made some really explosive plays, John. We saw just how elusive he can be with the ball in his hands. How encouraging is it to have Mims playing really well as a true freshman, Stogner a consistent weapon at the H-back position, and now maybe the most physically gifted wideout in the program, save for Jaden Hazelwood, in Theo Weiss, also contributing at a very high level.
Yeah, at this point in the season, you know, the halfway point of the season, you're turning a corner as a team. You're seeing these guys grow up, and you're seeing legitimate playmakers evolve. You're seeing guys like Theo Weiss, like you said, first career 100-yard game, 5 catches, 105, had a 48-yard catch on the sideline, turn, juke a guy, and get up the field. Almost outran his guy to the end zone, but he just didn't have enough kind of burst there at the end. He got caught. Another time, he puts a juke on a guy. I'm like, dude, take care of your ACLs. Don't be getting outside of your circle like that. That's what my daughter learned when she tore her ACL. Don't get outside of your circle. But boy, that was a wicked juke that he put on that receiver. I'm telling you, I think I looked up the stats right before we started, and he and Marvin Mims, I think, both have, if I'm not mistaken, 34 catches on the season. That's a true freshman and a true sophomore catching passes from a redshirt freshman, and the third leading receiver is a sophomore tight end, H-back, Austin Stogner. So, man, is the future bright for these guys or what? You wrote the story a few weeks ago about the coming receivers, the 5-star receivers that are coming down the line in the 21 class and the 22 class. Man, I'm liking these 19s and 20s that are on this roster right now. These guys are really, really coming around, and I think it's a perfect time for them to do that. Rough start to the season. You start out 0-2 in conference play, but look what they've done since then. I think they're just, like I said, turn the corner, improving every week, and that's what got Lincoln Riley tickled last night. I think Weiss is kind of he kind of stands as a little bit of an emblem for this. He said he's tickled that they're improving every week. They're making little adjustments and little steps and little growth every week, and Lincoln Riley loves that. I don't think he's blowing smoke. I think he is really excited by the fact that you're seeing these guys literally grow up a little bit more every week. And Theo Weiss, he comes out and he doesn't have a great start, and he drops a couple of big passes, and ball goes through his hands at Iowa State, and you're like, I thought this kid was going to be good. It just takes a little bit of time. It just takes a little bit of time for these guys to grow up.
Yeah, you mentioned the incremental growth week in and week out, John, and one of the areas in which we saw tremendous growth last night for the Sooners was in the ground game and the consistency therein. Oklahoma broke 4 yards per carry as a team for the first time all season, and more than anything, you chalk that up to the return of Rhamondre Stevenson, who came back with a vengeance off his suspension. 87 yards on the ground, which, that's not an eye-popping yardage total by any means, but he found the end zone 3 times, and on the third touchdown, ripped that jersey open to reveal the undershirt that read, "I'm back." And indeed, Rhamondre Stevenson is back, and the Sooners' vaunted rushing attack appears to be back as well. How big was he for the Sooners last night, John, and how big can he be going forward?
You know how games, I was going to ask you that question. Games, as you're watching them from the press box, you're way up high and you're way far out. I try to watch as much as I can through my binoculars, and if I had my binoculars here, I'd show you. They're big. They're field glasses, okay? You can see the craters on the moon with my game binoculars. That's how much I mean, my eyes aren't very good, I'll be honest with you, but that's where you watch the game from when you attend the game. What I was going to ask you, Parker, was what did it look like on TV? Because I've been watching football on TV since I was 4 years old. Okay, I've been watching NFL games and college football games since I was 4 years old. I've developed a feel for what things look like and what things feel like. Man, when I saw him in person, when I saw him take the handoff and just run through guys and stick that stiff arm up like it's a traffic barricade, one of those concrete barricades that's just here it comes and knocks guys over. What a difference maker he is. What an absolute standout difference maker he becomes. You turn around and give him the football, I bet Spencer Rattler right now is going, oh man, this is great. I got a brand new weapon I haven't had yet. Pledger's a nice back. McGowan is a nice back. I think both those guys have a bright future. I think both those guys deserve kind of a Medal of Honor for what they've done so far through the first half of the season, carrying the running game. But boy, you stick a guy like him in there. It's like you've called the Avengers all of a sudden. It's like okay, now it's real. Now we understand what this offense is capable of. Rhamondre Stevenson has the football. Captain America has a shield. You know what I'm saying? It looks, in person, it just looks different. What did it look like on TV, Parker?
Yeah, John, I tell you what, he runs with an edge, let me tell you. And we knew that, and we saw that in spurts last year because obviously he was stuck behind both Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks on that depth chart. But now he's entering a backfield picture in which he really has an opportunity to be the guy here in 2020. And I tell you what, it really seemed like last night he was ready to seize that opportunity because TJ Pledger and Seth McGowan have both been serviceable running backs. And you mentioned them, John. But here's the thing. Neither of them have the physical tools and that unique blend of power and elusiveness that Rhamondre Stevenson has. He's a bowling ball back who can make guys miss, and you don't see a lot of those. And let me tell you, he really does. I can't put a finger on what exactly it is about his game that sets him apart, John, except that he just runs with an edge. You can tell in the way that he hits the holes, in the way that he goes after contact and seeks out contact with defenders. This guy he's not there to play around. Right? When the ball gets in his hands, Rhamondre Stevenson's looking to punish somebody. And that's a characteristic that really is to be desired in a running back. And you don't see very many guys who not only seek that out, but are able to take the punishment that comes with it. And he can do that. He's durable. That's the other thing. Rhamondre Stevenson is he's
a future NFL guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He is a future NFL guy because of that durability, that blend of speed and power. Man, I'm going to be excited to see what he can do over the last 4 games of the regular season and going forward, assuming he returns in 2021. That's obviously kind of up in the air, but he'll have that option to be certain. So we'll see what Rhamondre Stevenson can do as the lead guy, presumably, in the Oklahoma backfield. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we talked about the offense. Now let's talk about the defense. Big night last night for Alex Grinch and Speed D.
Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176 or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air.
Well, Rhamondre Stevenson announced emphatically last night that he's back, and so too is Ronnie Perkins, the redshirt sophomore defensive end who, like Stevenson, was suspended for the first 5 games of this 2020 campaign. And John, it was a bit more understated in terms of Perkins' impact on this game last night. But you could tell from very early on that Ronnie Perkins is the kind of guy that's going to make a difference for this Oklahoma defense as this 2020 season comes to a conclusion, as they hit the closing stretch in this Big 12 schedule. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, you didn't see his impact quite as much in the box score, but what did you see from Perkins that could lend optimism to the notion that the Sooners defense is headed in the right direction?
Man, Parker, that guy plays with such energy. I mean, he is making so much money right now for the NFL draft because he is an extremely high-energy guy. Not that those other guys aren't, but when Ronnie Perkins hits the field, again, it just looks different. When he chased down, so Roderick Thompson gets around the edge, looks like he's got a touchdown. Who chases him down and chips him and gets him out of bounds? It's Ronnie Perkins on Trey Norwood's first interception. You saw Ronnie Perkins just come in and just swallow the running back on a. It was either a play action fake or an RPO, but either way, Henry Colombi, the Tech quarterback, basically pooped his pants right there. He saw Ronnie Perkins come in and devour his running back, and he threw the ball as quick as he could, and it got there too quick, popped up in the air, and it's an interception. Oklahoma turned it into a touchdown. Ronnie Perkins is to the defense what Rhamondre Stevenson is to the offense. I think Rhamondre Stevenson is the most gifted player on the offense, the most physically gifted, the guy who is going to be in the NFL, the guy who is going to have a career doing this football thing for a little while longer. I think Ronnie Perkins is the same thing on the defensive side of the ball. He's the guy who, when he steps on the field, you say, that's the dude right there. When he's the guy you want coming off the defensive bus first, just to scare the crap out of the other team. He really makes, to me, he makes that big of a difference. And I kind of forgotten that, He was good as a true freshman. He played, he got 6 sacks, I think, as a sophomore last year. And then he gets suspended and he misses half the year. And you're like, they'll be good when they get Ronnie Perkins. But no, he's the best defensive player they have. He's that good.
No, I agree with you, John. And you could tell when he ran down Sir Roderick Thompson on Tech's first drive. Okay, we might have forgotten it, but this dude can still move and move really well. And he's clearly excited to be back out there on the football field. Now, I want to go back to that first drive, John, because Columbia and Texas Tech moved the ball really efficiently on that drive and ultimately punched it into the end zone. Thompson scoring on a short touchdown run to give the Red Raiders a 7-0 lead. And it looked at that point as if Texas Tech might be able to establish some momentum and keep pace with the Sooners and maybe even dictate the pace of the game. Not so, because on Texas Tech's next drive, Trey Norwood gets a hold of a deflected pass, and that would set the tone for a really overpowering night for the Oklahoma defense. Norwood would add a second interception later in the first quarter, and Isaiah Thomas jumped on a fumble in the second quarter, giving the Sooners 3 takeaways on the night. John, how big were those turnovers in helping Oklahoma establish a rhythm on offense? Alex Grinch, of course, in postgame called it complementary football, the offense setting up the defense for success and vice versa. But for Alex Grinch's Speed D unit to get those 2 interceptions right off the bat in the first quarter, how big was that for them in terms of their confidence as this game progressed?
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, that was something. That was something that we don't see from the Oklahoma defense, first of all. That's what it was. It was something that we don't usually see. They turned turnovers into points immediately, both times. Short field. And consider, like you said, consider how the game started, okay? 7 plays, 75 yards. Tech gets the football. They march down the field, hot knife through butter. You're looking at the Oklahoma defense. People are on Twitter saying, hey, it's time to fire Alex Grinch. This guy's a joke, and this defense is terrible, and our DBs suck, and Trey Brown needs to find a new line of work. 7 plays, 75 yards. No resistance. Then what does the OU offense do? 3 and out. 3 and out. It's a punt. And at this point, I'm thinking, all right, what are we watching here? What exactly is going on? Then they force a punt from Texas Tech. Then OU, I think, goes down and punts again their second drive. No, they scored a touchdown on their second drive. So it's 7-7. Then the interception happens, and you're like, something's going on down on the field. Something is happening. Something is changing in the way this team plays. That interception, that first one, there were guys running around with their arms up. They didn't know. It reminded me of so I coached my son's 6th grade team, and we went like the first 5 games without getting a first down, okay? Literally like 1, 2, 3, or punt, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 and out. When we scored our first touchdown, my son popped a little reverse and busted one for about 30 yards. The kids didn't know what to do. My son held on to the football, and some kid came up and ran into him. That's what was going on when Trey Norwood got the football. People were running around going, yeah. No, bro, you got to block. You're on offense now. It was hilarious. I thought it was funny. Guys didn't know kind of how to react when one of their defensive teammates had the football under his arm. I thought it was kind of cute. It was kind of silly. But at the same time, the second time you saw guys on the next possession after next, you saw guys coming out and saying, okay, this ball is ours. I think it changed the tenor. I hate to overstate it. I do. I hate to be a prisoner of the moment, but I think it may have changed the tenor of the entire season for this Oklahoma defense. They got those 2 takeaways against Texas, which were both huge, one in the fourth quarter, I think, and one in overtime to end the game. But last night was first quarter, during the run of action, during the game, and you're like, okay, I think something just happened with this defense. I really think it changed the way they're approaching things. You saw more enthusiasm last night after those interceptions than I think you've seen out of this defense all year.
Well, and consider this, John, on somewhat of a different note. With Perkins back, how good is that defensive line going to be? How high is their ceiling? Because you got Perkins, you got Benito, you got Isaiah Thomas and Perion Winfrey on the interior. John, obviously you're pleased with the play in the secondary last night, getting those 2 interceptions, but everything starts with the pressure up front, and the Sooners have 4 guys up front who can create a lot of pressure. Winfrey in particular just looks fearsome lately. And you compound that with 2 of the best edge rushers in the conference in Benito and Perkins. The Sooners have the makings of a pretty terrifying defensive front 4. Now, John, here's what I want to ask you. The Sooners have Kansas on deck. The winless, Puka Williams-less Kansas Jayhawks. After that, they've got a bye week. And after that, they welcome Oklahoma State to town for Bedlam. Now, to me, this more than somewhat resembles, their stretch at the beginning of the season where they had Missouri State, then a bye, and then Kansas State. And we know how that turned out for the Sooners. So, with a virtual bye on deck and an actual bye following thereafter, immediately preceding probably their biggest game of the season, how does the defensive line and how the Sooners team as a whole, Alex Grinch's unit, but on a larger scale as well, how do the Sooners keep from losing their focus and losing their momentum as they prepare to take on the Jayhawks and then engage in the open date as they prepare for Bedlam?
It's easy. It really is. It's easy. They got a crooked number in the loss column. They have been force-fed for the past 5 weeks, 6 weeks, how terrible they are, especially on defense we're talking here. How they're not ready to play, how their defensive coordinator is a terrible human being. You know, I think these guys, and we go back to what Lincoln Riley said about the small steps, the improvements that you see week to week. I think these guys are all about that. I think they see the process now. I think they understand, okay, we're not entitled to win a game just because we got Sooners across our chest. I'm not entitled to be a great player just because the guy who was in front of me on the 2 deep last year was a great player. I've got some work to do. This team has some work to do. I think it's starting to set in with them. I do. They did last night's work. Think about this. Without last year's Big 12 Defensive Newcomer of the Year, Leron Stokes came up. We don't know exactly what it was, whether it was a concussion or an injury of some kind during the week, or it wasn't COVID because he was there with his teammates. He was not dressed out, but he missed the game. He's one of their best defensive linemen, one of their best, for sure, interior D linemen. So what happens? Isaiah Thomas slides over there and plays that spot. Josh Ellison comes over there and plays that spot. Thomas has a 1.5 sacks last night. The team as a whole had 9 tackles for loss against Texas Tech. I think the focus is going to be fine. I think that it goes back to what Spencer Rattler said last night. He said he told his teammates on Friday night, it's time we embarrass somebody. And they did that last night. I think they're eager to maybe do it again next week, this coming week when they play Kansas. I don't think that they're looking at that game like, it's Kansas, it's no big deal. I think they're looking at Kansas and saying, if we focus and we improve and we work, we can do the same thing this week we did last week, only it'll be worse. I think they understand that now, and then they get a week off, kind of do some recovery, some recuperation. And then, yeah, you're right. The biggest game of the year is Oklahoma State. Boy, we'll talk about this in the third segment, but what a rotten egg the Cowboys laid in Stillwater against Texas, huh?
Yeah, certainly, John, and that's certainly that looms large on the Sooners' schedule because although Oklahoma State hasn't been overwhelmingly impressive thus far, they're still right at the top there in the Big 12, and they're going to come out hungry to beat Oklahoma, especially in a year where at least it appeared at the outset that Oklahoma was down on themselves a little bit, and the Pokes would love nothing more than to take advantage of Oklahoma's weaknesses and be able to score a victory for Mike Gundy and company and maybe reinsert themselves as the front runner in the Big 12. Of course, that is wide open right now, and the Sooners are climbing right back into the thick of the race for the Big 12 championship. They're also climbing up the rankings. We'll discuss next on the SI Sooners podcast.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Stay up to date with the SI Sooners podcast on social media. Follow us on Twitter at @all_Sooners. And you can take a look at all the content we're churning out, audio, visual, written, or otherwise at allsooners.com. You can follow John on Twitter at Johnny Hoover and myself at Parker Thune. That's Thune. All right, John, let's talk about this Big 12 race because the picture didn't get any clearer this last week. In fact, it only got muddier after Texas upended Oklahoma State in Stillwater. It's chaotic right now in this conference, John. Top to bottom, there doesn't appear to be a clear front runner. And as we've said several times, in that context, you almost have to kind of give Oklahoma the benefit of the doubt when you're talking about who you trust to emerge out of this crowded Big 12 simply because the Sooners have been there before. In the latest AP poll, they're up from 24th to 19th, just 2 spots behind Iowa State at number 17 and 7 spots behind Oklahoma State at number 12. John, what do you make of where the Sooners sit? Is it fair, too high, too low? And where do they stack up on paper with Oklahoma State and Iowa State, who appear to be their 2 primary competitors right now in this conference?
Yeah, man, Oklahoma, 19 is probably about right. You know, they could, although I saw somebody on Twitter today, one of the fans said, I'd like to see 18 teams in the country who could beat us. That's a good point, actually, because this team, I can tell you right now, they may be, 4th or 5th in the standings, tied for 4th, I think, in the standings, but there ain't nobody in the Big 12 who wants to play Oklahoma right now. That's obvious. That's evident by what we're seeing on the field the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks and overtime period against Texas. Listen to this. This is how jacked up the Big 12 is. Stop me if I say something wrong because I'm going to try and go through this fast, but yet hopefully accurately to illustrate the point. Here we go. Oklahoma State lost to Texas. Oklahoma beat Texas. Oklahoma lost to Iowa State. Iowa State lost to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State beat West Virginia. Texas Tech beat West Virginia. West Virginia beat Kansas State. Kansas State beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Texas Tech. Texas beat Texas Tech. Oklahoma beat TCU. TCU beats Texas. Clear as mud. I mean, I'm going to try to do a power rankings here at the end of this segment. I have no confidence whatsoever that eliminate the bottom three. Eliminate the bottom two. Eliminate Kansas. Eliminate Baylor. I think Texas Tech is up in that discussion just because they beat West Virginia. Not the discussion to win it, but the discussion to be competitive. They should have beaten Texas. They should be 2-3 right now. Number 1 on my power ranking could also be number 7. And number 7 could also be number 1. That's how jacked up the Big 12 is right now. Parker, right now, you've got 2 teams at 4-1 that are Iowa State and K-State. You've got Oklahoma State at 3-1. You've got 3 teams at 3-2. That's OU, Texas, and West Virginia. TCU is 2-3. Baylor's 1-3. Tech is 1-4. And Kansas, of course, is 0-5. So what do you think about these power rankings? All right. You've got a 3-2 team on top of my power rankings. That's Oklahoma. Am I a homer? Maybe I am. Maybe I am, and I don't recognize it anymore. They're playing better than anybody. Right now, at this moment, they're playing better than anybody in the conference. They're the team. They're the one team that nobody else in the conference wants to see. I would say Iowa State would rank second. I got to put Texas in front of Oklahoma State. Texas would be 3, OSU 4. But I have no confidence in that whatsoever because OSU was the better team yesterday. They just, crapped down their leg with 4 turnovers and roughed the punter on 4th and 23 or whatever that was. After Oklahoma State, I got 5th is West Virginia. Kansas State is 6th. TCU is 7th. Texas Tech is 8th. Baylor is 9th. And Kansas is 10th. Again, I have no confidence in any of that. What about you?
John, here's what I want to know. Does anybody want to win this conference? Because right now, it's like I'm looking at 8 teams. And yeah, you mentioned you can throw Baylor and Kansas out of the picture for the most part. But I'm looking at 8 teams that have tried so hard to lose games through the first half of this season. Watching that Oklahoma State-Texas game yesterday was mind-boggling to me. It frustrated me to watch as someone who has watched football since I was very young as well. Both those teams tried so hard to lose to one another. Oklahoma State didn't want to win that game. At least that's how it seemed. Texas didn't want to win that game. Everybody in this conference right now has so many glaring weaknesses. And Oklahoma, to your point, looks like the team right now that has the least weaknesses, at least how they're playing right now in the moment. It seems like they've worked out those early season kinks and jitters. It's
got to break their way, though. It's got to break their way. They still need lots of help. Not lots of help. K-State's probably going to be out of it. The quarterback situation, Skylar Howard's out for the year. The freshman comes in and throws 3 interceptions yesterday at West Virginia. I don't think they're going to stay at the top of the Big 12 standings much longer. So I think you're right. It comes down to Oklahoma State, Iowa State. They've already played. So if both those teams essentially, one of them, let's say Oklahoma loses to Oklahoma State, Oklahoma's out of it. Oklahoma needs to run the table and hope that one of those other 2 teams loses twice.
All right, John, let's switch gears. We got a couple more things to get to before we wrap it up here on the SI Sooners podcast. First of all, a little bit of breaking news here. And I mean breaking because this just happened about 30 seconds ago. It's finally official. Billy Bowman has committed to Oklahoma. So Lincoln Riley adds yet another phenomenal piece to his 2021 class and a guy that can be a weapon in so many different facets of the offense for Caleb Williams. As you start to look 2 or 3 years down the road, my goodness, that 21 class for Oklahoma.
I can't wait to see this guy play.
Absolutely, John. And he's a guy that you can stick so many different positions. He's a guy that you can do so much with in an offense. He's much like Jalil Farouk in that capacity. So, man, things are starting to shape up for Lincoln Riley and the Sooners, but don't want to look too far down the road. They've still got unfinished business here in 2020 and a 5-year streak of conference championships to defend. Now, last thing on the podcast, John, this came across the wire today as well, but legendary University of Oklahoma basketball coach Billy Tubbs, who coached at the school from 1980 to 1994, did pass away today at age 85. He won Big 8 Coach of the Year honors 4 times over the course of his tenure in Norman and led the Sooners to a national runner-up finish in 1988. John, you've lived in this state far longer than I have. You've seen a lot more of Billy Tubbs, and you've seen a lot more University of Oklahoma sports than I have, so I want to yield to you on this one. What can you say about Tubbs, his legacy, and what he meant to the Sooner family?
That's a hard one, man, because for so many years he really was Oklahoma basketball. He was the embodiment. He and his style and his personality were just perfect. They were just perfect blend for what Oklahoma basketball was and needed to be. OU basketball was such a pedestrian program. They had some good players coming up, guys like Alvin Adams and good coaches, guys like John McLeod. But when Billy Tubbs got here and infused his personality with that style of play, up-tempo, defense, full court press, turning defense into offense, score 110 if you can, boys. You know, they had their record at Lloyd Noble over a 7-year stretch was 108-2. 108-2. They won 108 out of 110 ball games during a 7-year stretch. 5 of those years, they went undefeated at Lloyd Noble. Now, imagine the energy in that stadium, in that arena, for 100 points a game. And not just 100 points, but you're beating people's brains out. Oklahoma was one of the elite programs while Billy Tubbs was here. One of the elite programs in the country. They after losing the national championship game, they start, I think, the next year, 88-89 maybe, as the number 1 team in the NCAA tournament, the top overall seed. It's just it's tough to know that someone who, gosh, you know, middle of the week we find out that he's in a hospice care. And by, you know, Saturday night, Sunday morning, you find out that he doesn't have much longer. And just like that, 85 years old, he's gone. It's tough to know that someone who brought that kind of attitude and that kind of energy to a young basketball fan base and energized really an entire state. It's tough to know that they're gone like that. That's a tough one to swallow.
And Tubbs' career in collegiate athletics lasted over half a century. He began coaching in 1960 and most recently stepped down as athletic director at his alma mater, Lamar University, in 2011. Billy Tubbs was 85 years old. Well, with that, I'm going to call it a night here on the SI Sooners podcast. For John Hoover, I am Parker Thune. You can listen to us wherever you...
Hey, I'm going to remind the listener and the viewer, get over to sisooners.com for the latest on Billy Bowman, because Parker's leaving here right now and he's going to go write a story. So hurry on over there.
That's right. And let me tell you, that's big. And I don't know if y'all realize how big it is for Oklahoma's 2021 class. The former Texas commit, Lincoln Riley, manages to flip Billy Bowman, and he's now headed to Norman. So another big ad for the Sooners in this 21 cycle. You can listen to the SI Sooners podcast wherever you hear your podcast, whether that's Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google. You can also watch the SI Sooners podcast on John's YouTube channel. That is John Hoover Media. And of course, stay up to date with us at allsooners.com for all of our content throughout the week, whether written, video, audio, whatever it may be. We've got you covered on every platform over at allsooners.com. Tell you what, John, my phone is quaking in the aftermath of Billy Bowman's commitment. So with that, let's call it a wrap. We'll see you next time on the SI Sooners podcast.